Hey everybody, it's Fiction Friday, and today we are going to talk about The Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyne, a story about a naive German boy during the Holocaust. Now, this isn't going to be one of my more bubbly or happy vlogs, because it's not exactly about a happy topic. This book covers a heavy and delicate topic, and it does so quite well, but you have to keep in mind as you read it that while it's historically based, it is fiction. Because it is such a big topic, you want to talk about it in the right way. John Boyne really tried hard, and I am also going to try hard. I am sorry if I err in my ways, but this is my attempt. I really love this book, and I don't love it because it's happy by any means. Anyone knows anything about the book or the Holocaust or anything knows that is not even possible. But I like it because it is really a gripping story, and it reveals a side of the Holocaust that we don't often talk about. I've been to the Holocaust Museum with countless other Americans, but that's nothing compared to when I visited Dachau with my family. It's amazing, isn't it, how we talk about visiting these places when they used to be a thing to be avoided by any means necessary. The point being, I've been there, and while I was there 60 years after the Holocaust, it had an effect on me that I could not have predicted. Everyone walks around in silence, and if you speak in hushed tones out of respect for the dead and the survivors. Now, this naive German boy literally has no idea what's going on, and his naivety is kind of why Boyne chose the perspective of a child. He really did have no idea what was going on. He called Auschwitz Outwith. He called the Führer Fury, and he thought the uniforms were pajamas, for goodness sakes. He had no idea what anything was happening or anything. So Boyne, going from this perspective, was then able to talk about these things from a fairly blank slate. So there's a part of me that understands how he could be that way, because he is young. Then there's another part of me that's like, how could you not figure out what's going on? I mean, is the boy that brainwashed and that naive? Is that really even possible? But at the same time, brainwashing, fear-mongering, following the group, these things are how people got involved in the Nazi regime. I mean, how else could people follow such a horrible path? There are a few people that are just awful, but for the majority, you wonder. But back to the boy, there was the camp, and I can just imagine the smell of the bodies and the screams of the tortured, the hopelessness on their faces. How could you not put two and two together, even as a 9-year-old? But then again, everyone is different. And I take the boy for what he is. It is a work of fiction. Like I said earlier, it is a work of fiction. You have to keep that in mind heavily as you read this. And while it is historically based, the fact that it is fiction allows the author leniency. For instance, to be historically accurate, the house would have been inside the camp, not outside. And yeah, the fence would have been electrocuted, and the kid would never have been left unguarded. But would any of these things have allowed the story to happen? No. And despite there being changes, the story remains effective. And because there are changes, it's effective in a new and different way. But to me, the atrocities of the Holocaust is not what the author chose to focus on here. Yes, he does talk about it. Yes, obviously, it's there throughout the book, but it's more in the background. What he does focus on is the German family. Take, for instance, the father. Earlier in the book, it shows that he has a bit, or had at one point, a bit of doubt about the Nazi regime. But in the end, he chose to act out of patriotism and fear. I don't really think that he used to be a bad guy. I mean, with the maid, he basically saved the maid from destitution. So I think he really just got sucked into it all, and then their beliefs became his own. And because of what happens to his son, that seed of doubt grows. I realized I never showed you the book before. That's the book. In the end, Boyne says of the father, that he went without complaint, and he was happy to do so because he didn't really mind what they did to him anymore. That's really sad. If you want to be sad, read this book. Don't read it if you want to be happy. Just read it if you want to be sad. But anyway, I think that that saying that the atrocities that he committed finally sank in, and he couldn't stand on his beliefs as firmly as he once did. And as such, he let them do with him what they wanted. I mean, it leads you to believe that he was punished for apathy, which they saw as abandonment for their cause. While I want to think nothing good of the Nazi regime, I like to think that there were officers kind of like him, in that they were once good men, but they got sucked in. And actually, research kind of tells us that this happened. Fear-mongering, patriotism, going with the group, desperation, all of these things played a factor, and they soon just became what they were. And that makes me wonder, like, how high up did those people get? And how could they be that way and still treat the Jews as poorly as they did? Not like people. Actually, it says at one point in the book that the father says to the son, Bruno, they're not people. And that kind of hits you because while you know that that's what they thought, every time you hear it, it's just like an arrow hits you straight in the heart. And you're like, that's just it's beyond words. I wonder sort of the same thing about the rest of the family. For instance, the mom obviously wasn't for everything that the Nazis did per se, but she wasn't exactly against them either, and she was married to an officer, so she couldn't exactly be innocent. And then we have the grandparents. Now, the grandfather is all in support of his son. He is proud of him for seeing him in that uniform, and he really likes his patriotism. But the grandmother, on the other hand, cannot believe he wore that uniform to her house. She cannot believe that he had dinner with the Führer. She's completely against the Nazi regime. And then we have the children, brainwashed beyond belief, with no clue what the rest of the world functions like, because their views are so skewed by their elders. Some turn out decent, like Bruno, and then some turn out like his sister, which even he calls the hopeless case. I think that's my favorite thing about this book. I think it was also Boyne's kind of goal, I guess, or one of them. It was to represent the different types of German people that lived during the Nazi regime. Some of them were just awful, awful, horrible people. Obviously, those existed, but not all of them were all bad, and this book helped us see those complexities. And I'm sure that it didn't even cover all of it. I'm sure there are complexities within the complexities, but he can only get there and sound like it's a children's book. But it also puts some rep out there for children's books. That is a hardcore children's book. So overall, this book earned a special place on my shelf. It's not perfect, but it's up there. It's well worth the read, but I must warn you, it is one of the saddest books I have read in a long time, which says something, considering it doesn't even talk about the hardest parts of the Holocaust. On another related note, if you haven't heard of Miyazaki, you need to get your life together. No, just kidding, but like kind of. Hayao Miyazaki works for Studio Ghibli. All their films are amazing. You should watch all of them. But in particular, my favorite is The Wind Rises. It is Miyazaki's last film, and to me it is his best. And in that story, there's actually an anti-Nazi German, and he's one of my favorite characters. He's really cool and kind of mysterious, but it gives you an idea of how the anti-Nazi Germans had to live, kind of in hiding. If you liked this video, you should totally like or subscribe, or don't, but you should. And if you have any comments or anything like that, please let me know in the comments below. That's all for now. Cheers!